Is Sunday Zach Wilson's make or break moment? Will the weather cooperate? We're talking Jets Patriots today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Friday, September 22nd, 2023, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. Subscribe to the show for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you'll get new episodes as soon as they're posted. If you're listening on a podcast source and enjoy the show, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. These things help us out and help other Jets fans find the podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app to create an account and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Jets play the Patriots this Sunday, MetLife Stadium, 1 o'clock, the rare 1 p.m. kickoff in the early season in 2023 for the New York Jets. Today, we're going to preview the game, and it's going to be an interesting game for the New York Jets. They have not beaten the New England Patriots since Week 15 in 2015. In some ways, the Jets have kind of been chasing that moment for the last 7-8 years because that win over the Patriots late in the 2015 season was a great win. It was an overtime victory. The Jets blew a big lead and then rallied and came back and won the game in overtime. That put them in position to make the playoffs in 2015. And it gave them the one game the last week of the regular season they've had since in the last decade where they were actually alive and had a chance to clinch a playoff spot. And they lost to the Buffalo Bills that next week. And they have not even really come close to making the playoffs since then. And they have not beaten the New England Patriots since then. And the Jets let 2 games that were winnable last year against the Patriots get away from them. And one of the biggest reasons for that is Zach Wilson's play in both of those games. In the first game in the Meadowlands, Wilson threw 3 interceptions. The next game in Foxborough was the infamous game the Jets lost 10-3 on a last-minute punt return touchdown. And Zach Wilson had a really rough game. Then in the post-game press conference, when he was asked something to the effect of, did you feel like he let the defense down? He answered it no, which of course had a chain reaction in the locker room, was part of the reason Zach was benched the next week. And even if you go back to 2021, Zach Wilson's games against the Patriots were really rough. He had the 4 interceptions in his first home game, and that was the first home game of his career. And then in Foxborough that year, the Jets got absolutely crushed, and Zach suffered an injury that knocked him out a couple of weeks. So the Patriots have been a difficult matchup for Zach Wilson, and not entirely for the reasons you'd think. I mean, you never want to face Bill Belichick as a young quarterback, but when you go back and watch the film, a lot of the issues Zach Wilson has had have been really unforced errors where he's making mistakes. It's not so much that the Patriots are doing anything crazy that's confusing him. He's just not making basic plays. And that's been one of the stories of the early part of Zach Wilson's career. On Sunday, we have a chance for redemption. Now, I want to be very careful about how I phrase this because when you have a young quarterback who struggled to the extent Zach Wilson has struggled in his first 2 years plus, we're going to be objective about it. The odds are against Zach. It's tough, and it's just not easy for any young quarterback to come into this league and have success, but Zach's had a particularly tough time. So I don't want to predict great things because any progress you see in the NFL is always one game away from kind of unraveling. But I want to say this, and I say this as somebody who was probably earlier than a lot of folks were in diagnosing that we had an issue with Zach Wilson, even going back to his rookie season. And then last year, the Jets got off to a 5-2 start. But at the time, I was kind of saying, if you went back and listened to those podcasts, Jets were not really getting a lot out of Zach Wilson in those games. And I was diagnosing things on film that were bad. The stats, if you looked at the comparable players, they were bad. It was pretty clear to me early on. I think earlier than a lot of people, and I'm not trying to give myself too much credit because it's not like I get everything right, but I was one of the earliest people to say that, the Jets may have a problem in Zach Wilson. And I said it before that New England game. I said it before, the meltdowns last year. I said it going back to his rookie season that, there were issues there. So keep that in mind when I say what I'm about to tell you. I went back and watched the Dallas film. And if you look statistically, his performance against Dallas was very similar to what he's done his first 2 seasons. I don't think the film matched these statistics, though. And I mean that in a good way. The quarterback I saw on film looked like a quarterback who might be able to play in the NFL. I saw a quarterback who was not fooled. I mean, maybe once or twice was fooled when Dallas, threw a little bit of a wrinkle coverage wise at him. But for the most part, was able to read defenses that changed post snap from their pre snap look, a cover 2 that rolls into a cover 1, which sometimes changes the progression. I saw a quarterback who looked calm in the pocket, who, when there was a running lane, took it, who did not do the spin move and run 20 yards back the way he was a year ago at the first sign of pressure. I saw a quarterback who was not making wildly errant throws on short passes. I mean, a couple plays, maybe put too much mustard on a couple passes to Breece Hall. The quarterback I saw looked like one that when he struggled, it was more the typical young quarterback inexperienced things than the stuff we saw last year, which were things that he failed to execute at a fundamental level. I don't know what the future holds for Zach Wilson. I think we've established I'm really bad at making predictions on this show. And I think predictions are really hard because there's just some certain things life is like that. You can't predict things in life, and you can't really predict how certain things are going to go in the NFL. Could you have predicted Aaron Rodgers would go out after 4 plays? I know there's some sarcastic Jets fans who are really pessimistic who are like, yeah, I could. But there's things that are difficult to predict in the NFL. What I will say is that what I saw on film against Dallas did not match the statistics. And if what we saw on film against Dallas continues, the statistics will follow. And Zach Wilson will put up better numbers this year because I'm seeing a better quarterback right now. And you can go back. If you're new to the show and you're wondering, it was this guy like talking up Zach Wilson a year or two ago? No, I wasn't. I was sounding the alarm bells because even when things were going well for the Jets, I was seeing things I did not like in Zach Wilson. I don't know what it is. I really don't want to give Nathaniel Hackett credit based on what we saw against Dallas. I really don't, because that was a horrible game plan in a lot of ways. So I'm a little mad at Hackett, but maybe Hackett's helping out a little bit with Zach. We've heard about the Aaron Rodgers effect. I've voiced skepticism on that, but maybe there's something to it. And of course, it could unravel this week. Belichick, just because Belichick has not thrown a lot of exotic looks at Zach in the past, that's no guarantee that will continue. Belichick may throw looks that completely throw Zach off his game. But what I'll say is that I'm seeing progress from Zach Wilson. And even if it hasn't shown up in the numbers yet, it will. I know he threw 3 interceptions in the fourth quarter. One of them was just trying to do too much. The second one was just an amazing play by a safety where Zach made the right read and maybe could have gotten rid of the ball a little sooner, but was not an egregious throw. The third one I think was just a miscommunication between Zach and Michael Carter. I think Zach has moments where he tries to do a little too much. I think he has moments where he makes throws maybe he shouldn't make. That's still a concern. But a lot of the mechanical issues, I think, are improving. A lot of the pocket issues, I think, are improving. A lot of the other issues, the accuracy, I think it's getting better. Is it better to the point where he should be playing quarterback this year and starting in the NFL? I don't know, but I've got to be honest with you. I wouldn't be shocked if Zach Wilson went out and had a good game this Sunday. I'm not going to guarantee it, especially based on what we've seen in the past against New England, but I think it's possible. I think it's possible that maybe we're starting to see Zach Wilson turn the corner, and maybe the team that's been his nemesis, the team that's been the Jets' nemesis for so long, maybe this is the turning point where something good starts happening for him. Or it also could be the other way. I don't think we're that far away from being the beginning of the end for Zach. I think that the first move, the Jets you kind of hear the rumblings in the media that Jets are sticking with Zach Wilson for now, and for now is the operative phrase. If Zach goes out and struggles again this weekend, look, they're not going to go to Tim Boyle against Kansas City next week. But that could be the point where maybe a Carson Wentz or some Colt McCoy or somebody like, and listen, these are not great names, but that could be the point where the Jets sign somebody with the idea that maybe they eventually replaces Zach in the lineup. Big weekend for Zach. Very important game for him. Now, head here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we're going to turn our attention to the weather. I don't think we talk much about the weather on this podcast, but the weather could impact the game. Despite everything I just told you, it could make some of what I just said moot, and we'll discuss that continuing this Friday edition of the Locked On Jets podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Gametime. Buying tickets to events should not be stressful, especially your favorite events. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. A couple of weeks back, I went to the U.S. Open tennis in New York, and I said, you know what? I need to put my money where my mouth is. I talk about Gametime all the time on Locked On Jets. Let's give it a try. I needed last-minute tickets. The experience was super easy. They got me tickets at a good price. really, I use Gametime and I loved it. Gametime is the place for last minute ticket deals. Forget about planning months in advance. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy theater, and more. The Gametime guarantee also means that you'll get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. And you get images of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. There's not going to be any surprises about getting obstructed seats. Snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by DoorDash. Do you love the convenience of getting what you want right to your door? With DoorDash grocery delivery, you can stock up for the week or order last-minute cravings conveniently. You've trusted DoorDash to deliver your restaurant favorites, and now you can get grocery delivery that actually delivers too. With thousands of grocery stores to choose from, you'll find the best in your neighborhood and boost your local economy with each and every order. You'll get exactly what you ordered, or we'll make it right. So sit back and enjoy quality groceries just like you picked them yourself. Want even more value? You can save all your grocery and restaurant favorites with a $0 delivery fee on all eligible orders with a Dash Pass membership. With easy substitutions right in the app and best-in-class customer support, DoorDash delivers groceries exactly how you want it. Get 50% off your first DoorDash order up to a $20 value when you use code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout. Limited time offer, terms apply. That's 50% off up to $20, no minimum subtotal, and zero delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app in the App Store and enter code LOCKEDONNFL. Don't forget that's code LOCKEDONNFL for 50% off your first order with DoorDash. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. And a big shout out to you everydayers. Can't tell you how much I appreciate the folks who tune in on a daily basis. It's been great to interact with you over the last few weeks. A difficult time for New York Jets fans as we've kind of had to all talk through the Aaron Rodgers injury together. We have a game this Sunday, Jets Patriots. Really important game for the New York Jets. Kansas City coming to town, Philadelphia coming not that long after. It's not that hard if the Jets lose this game to see this thing going down a very negative path for this team. Whereas if the Jets get a victory and they're 2-1, you can say, you know what, we've navigated a really tough stretch without Aaron Rodgers. And, even though if we have tough games coming up, we've shown we're a tough out, and that schedule is going to open up in a few weeks, and we're going to have a lot of manageable games down the stretch. And maybe we can make a playoff run. Kind of a potential fork in the road type game. We've talked about how it's a potential fork in the road type game for Zach Wilson. Also a potential fork in the road type game for this team this year in 2023. But weather could come into play in this game. Now, I'll tell you something you probably don't know. Not a lot of people know this, but when I was a young kid, the first thing I wanted to do was to be a weatherman. I always wanted to I wanted to grow up and become a TV weatherman. So obviously it didn't go that way and kind of got into the sports thing, which is pretty fun. But I've kind of studied the weather a little bit. I'm not like an expert on any of this stuff. If you're following the weather this week, you know that there's like some sort of tropical system off the East Coast that could be hitting the New York area right around game time on Sunday. Now, the forecast is a bit unclear, and this far out, and I'll tell you something I know about some of these tropical systems here from my research as my wannabe TV weatherman persona. It's difficult to predict rainfall and where a tropical storm is going to hit this far out, 48 hours out. You never know exactly. You see, if you ever watch like the Weather Channel, you see the cone of uncertainty, but there's a chance that it's going to rain pretty hard in this game. And it's interesting because I actually started doing some research because I've heard players say that the rain doesn't really impact you that much. But then I went to a few websites that actually like studied rain games versus games where the weather is good. It actually did show that the rain does to a certain extent minimize the passing game. And, it's difficult to say exactly why. I mean, maybe the field's a little bit slippery. We know the ball's slicker, so maybe it's tougher to catch it. I don't know how it impacts quarterbacks throwing it. But the rain could have a big impact in this game. And we know Nathaniel Hackett, listen, despite what I said, I think Nathaniel Hackett's going to play a very conservative game plan. This is a Patriots offense that Sauce Gardner said it right. If you read a quote Sauce had a little bit earlier in the week, he said something to the effect of, this is not like a complex offense. It's not a completely explosive offense. They just execute at a really high level. They're obviously very well coached. They're well schemed now with Bill O'Brien back. You may say what you will about Bill O'Brien, some of the trades he made as coach of the Houston Texans. Bill O'Brien's a quality offensive coach in this league. And This is, I think, is going to be very much a field position game. I think it's very much going to be a game where you're not going to see high scoring. I think that, if you're looking at the over under, and I don't like to give betting advice, but I think you definitely look at taking the under in this one because the Jets are going to play very conservatively. It's kind of the way they want to play. I think you'll see first of all, I also think you're going to see more Breece Hall because Breece Hall only got 4 touches, and the Jets have to realize that was a big mistake in that game on Sunday. But this is going to be a game where field position is going to matter. It's going to come down to, which team avoids the big mistake. And the weather is kind of an X factor in this because, again, the ball is going to be slicker. So I think it's going to be a question of which team can hold on to the ball, who's going to fumble the slick ball away. And I think we'll see how special teams are impacted by this. It did not come into play last week because the Jets got blown out. We don't know Greg Zuerlein's status for this game at the point we're recording this podcast, but having his leg back in the lineup, Austin Seibert's a decent kicker. He did his job last weekend. He made all of his kicks last weekend. He doesn't have Zuerlein's range though, and especially in what could potentially be a bad weather game, having a kicker with a little extra distance that could make a difference because it's I think one area where the weather could come into play is on those longer field goal attempts. I think it clearly could clearly will impact how far kickers can get the ball. The conditions are never favorable in those situations, so that's something to keep an eye on. It'll be interesting, and it'll be interesting to see if the teams adjust because sometimes what happens is if the weather's really bad and if it's going to be really windy, which we don't know how windy it's going to be. We don't know whether it's going to rain. It may not rain at all. The storm may not hit at this point, but it'll be interesting to see the extent to which it impacts teams' abilities to adjust because sometimes what happens is teams come in with a game plan and then they realize the conditions just will not allow it. So it's something I'm sure the Jets are monitoring right now. I don't know if the Jets have a team meteorologist, but I think you'll want to think through your game plan in the days leading up to this game and make sure that you'll be able to execute what you want to do. Now, I think in the Jets and Patriots case, again, you're going to probably see pretty conservative offenses in this game. So when the weather gets bad, teams tend to play very conservatively. So to the extent it makes a difference, you could see weather slow offense down even more than you were already expecting. It'll be an interesting thing to watch. Now, head here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll turn our attention to the defensive side of the ball for the Jets. I think this is a matchup that looks really good for the defense. I think it's what's known as a get-right game, and we'll discuss that in more detail continuing this Friday edition of the Locked On Jets podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you just bet more or less than 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks is a lot of fun. Testing your skills on PrizePicks this football season is an exciting way to play DFS. It's simple to play. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of player and stat types are what makes PrizePicks the number one daily fantasy sports app. This week on PrizePicks, you can select Justin Jefferson for more than 100 yards, Lamar Jackson for more than 1 passing touchdown. You can do Odell Beckham for less than 50 yards, Josh Allen for less than 2 passing touchdowns. There's a lot of different ways you can play PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match of up to $100. Again, it's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match of up to $100. PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Code LockedOnNFL to play PrizePicks. This is the Locked On Jets podcast on this Friday. Jets and Patriots, a game both teams really need. I've talked about how the Jets have a tough upcoming schedule. Entering the Kansas City game 2-1 versus entering it 1-2 on a 2-game losing streak, that's a world of difference. And the Patriots are 0-2, and history shows us that it's tough to come back from an 0-2 start. It's even tougher to come back from 0-3. And I know there's a tendency to say, well, it's only 2 games. You have to remember there's only 17 games in the season. So let's say it takes 10 wins to get to the playoffs. You start 0-2. I mean, you've got to go 10-5 over the last 15. You start 0-3, you got to go 10-4. And even if you say it takes 9-8 to get to the playoffs, okay. Well, if it takes 9-8, 0-2 start means you need to go 9-6. 0-3 start means you need to go 9-5. You essentially need to play like one of the best teams in the NFL the rest of the way. It's not so easy. So big game for both teams. And I think both teams will lean on the defense in this one. I think you'll see both coaches trying to avoid the big mistake, because if you look at the 2 games last year, it was the big mistake that cost, especially the first game, that cost the Jets the ball game. And then in the second game, I mean, the Jets, I guess the Patriots did make a play on the punt game, but it wasn't the offense that did the job. Patriots were controlling that game territorially. It was only a matter of time before they broke through. The Jets were kind of lucky that game came down to a punt return because the Patriots probably should have taken the lead about 2-3 times in the second half there. I think this is a game that plays to the Jets defense strengths because this is not a Patriots team that has a lot of explosive plays. The Jets are very good at rallying to the football. There's not a lot of it. The Cowboys did put together a couple of methodical drives, including the first drive of the game. You did not love the way the Jets defense played. You also did not love the way the Jets defensive line failed to get to Dak Prescott. I think it's a different story in this game. I think the Patriots have a couple of spots on the offensive line that can be exploited. I like the Quinnen Williams versus Cole Strange matchup. Cole Strange coming back from injury last week, did not have a great game. I think this just seems like a get right game for the Jets defense. And I think it's unlikely the Jets defense is going to play that badly 2 weeks in a row. So I think, the Jets always need to lean on their defense at this point. With Aaron Rodgers out until further notice, this is going to be a team that's going to win its games by playing defense. Even with Zach Wilson improving, I still don't think there's the trust there at this point with the coaching staff where they're going to put the ball in Zach's hands unless they have to. This is going to be about the defense, the pass rush getting home. It's going to be about the corners covering. It's going to be, and this is just a team that's going to have a tough time moving the ball against the Jets because I don't see New England having any receivers who can get open against Sauce Gardner. I don't see them having receivers who can get open consistently against DJ Reed. Now, last year in the game in the Meadowlands on third down, they did try and go after CJ Mosley in zone, but I think this Jets defense is just more talented than the New England Patriots offense. So I think at the end of the day, talent wins out. I think the Jets will play very well on this side of the ball. I think the one thing you have to watch out for is in that game in the Meadowlands last year, Ramondre Stevenson had a big drive, including one in the second half where New England kind of took control of the game. So you hope the Jets control the trenches, not just getting to the quarterback, but also in stopping the run. I think, though, that this is the type of matchup I like for the Jets. I mean, next week against Patrick Mahomes, it's going to be an entirely different matchup, but a team that doesn't have a lot of explosive plays on offense, that's what you like to see from the Jets. I think that this Patriots team kind of matches up. I think the Jets can match up well with this Patriots team. And there's a lot of trepidation about this game because, again, the Jets haven't beaten New England since 2015. And that includes now 3 straight years without Tom Brady. It's easy enough to explain the pre-2020 Jets losing to New England because the Patriots had the quarterback who was the greatest of his era, one of the 5 best of all time. And quite frankly, there's a strong case Brady's the greatest of all time. You're going up against Belichick, a guy who's just tormented the Jets, a guy who loves to torment the Jets, and a guy who's as good at cooking up game plans and making in-game adjustments as any coach. I really sense a lot of trepidation from the fan base leading up to this game, and that's natural. The Jets have been dominated by New England for the better part of 20 years. But I think if you look at this matchup, if we get to Sunday night and the Patriots have won, I think it's more likely the Jets have done something to lose the game. I don't think it'll be a situation where, if the Patriots have more points, I think we'll look back at this and say the Jets threw that game away because that's certainly what happened at the Meadowlands last year. And the way Zach Wilson looks, I have hope. And the way I expect the defense to bounce back, I don't expect the defense to look that bad in this game. New England's a road favorite at the time we're recording this podcast, but I think there's a lot to like about the Jets right now. And I have optimism that maybe they'll get to 2-1. Maybe we'll see a good performance out of Zach Wilson. I understand the concern from the fan base because this is a fan base that's not, I mean, I can tell you what happened opening night. It's a fan base that's come to expect bad things, but I think that, I don't know. I just have a feeling that maybe I'm just being hopelessly optimistic. I feel like this might be the end of the streak. All streaks have to come to an end, and this is as good of a time as any for the Patriots' domination over the Jets to end. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you're listening on a podcast source, please give the show a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube, give this episode a big thumbs up. These things help us out, help other Jets fans find the show. Have a great Friday, everybody. Have a great weekend. Stay safe with the weather. We'll be back to talk about what happened Jets Patriots on Monday.